Hey everybody, it's Charlie with 4BZ Truth. I wanted to say hello again and let you know what's very heavy on my mind. Over the last several years, I've been researching the flat Earth. Now, I know a lot of people that are now subscribers did not subscribe to my channel because of my perspective on a metaphysical Earth reality. It was more so having to do with the spiritual or near-death experiences, or the, I guess you could say the metaphysical, but not necessarily the Earth shape or whatever. But I don't know why, but I've been feeling like I wanted to research it a lot more again. And I kind of was triggered by Owen Benjamin. And I know a lot of the people in the flat Earth community would actually know exactly who that guy is, just based on the fact that, well, he has a large following, like almost 300,000 subs. And he's actually constantly talking about how there's a lot of compelling things having to do with the science of, the lack of curvature, and the science or just the conspiratorial aspects of the lies and deception in not only in the government, but just in the higher levels of society, like banks, and just everything is like all money driven, or maybe money is just the scheme that is like the facade of the way the way they present themselves as money being the control factor. But I don't know, something tells me the power is already there, so money is not necessary at this point when you're referring to the higher levels of you might call the shadow government. Now, I know that a lot of people that listen to my rants may not be able to track with me as far as like what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the power elite or the shadow government or whatever. And it's like, I've been looking into this crap for so many years now that it's kind of just an assumed implication. Like, I've always implied, or I just kind of speak it as if it were so. And I'm convinced that there's false flag attacks, and the media is there to present a narrative of so that they can have a sense of control over the masses. Now, one of the things that has really thrown me for a loop lately is that when I really just start looking at what is popular, I start realizing that people are truly controlled by the media, because and not to mention the media actually controls social media as well at this point. I mean, I know YouTube is one of the main forums that the mainstream news media controls. So a lot of people may or may not realize, but this whole flat Earth concept has been flagged as this it's so controversial that it needs to be controlled. And now all the search algorithms fall on mainstream news outlets. So like if you search for flat Earth research or flat Earth whatever, you'll find all the debunking videos that pop up on the top of the list. And the whole Logan Paul thing was a whole debunking or trolling of the flat Earth community. Now it is actually high on the list. So like as if they chose Logan Paul as their spokesperson for the globe Earth. And I guess it makes sense because people are so like sheeple, you might say, that they could be swayed. It's almost like the joke is on our society because they make Logan Paul the one that represents the ones that are considered this, the ones who are smart, which are the globe believers. And this whole argument between globe and flat Earth, it doesn't matter that much to me anymore. I mean, I started looking into this in early 2015. So it's been 4 years since I really started looking into it. And I've gotten to the point where I don't care much about what the shape of the Earth is. I care more about the implications that are behind that. And I made that clear in other videos that I've put out there. And I actually, part of me wonders is if I title this video anything having to do with flat Earth, it's just going to be, like I can't be found algorithmically, and because anything that says flat Earth basically is going to be subject to, I don't know exactly how they would do it, but the video that I watched with I watched the Logan Paul video. That was stupid, because he made it seem like he believed it, and then at the end he didn't want to admit to it, and like it kind of turned like all of a sudden. And so the Owen Benjamin thing that I was listening to this morning was talking about how YouTube was demonetizing his super chats because he was talking about things that were too controversial, or whatever the case is. I don't really agree with his perspective on like the Jews per se. I mean, I do agree that there are a sect of Jews that are very evil, and but that ties into biblical prophecy in a lot of ways, because it talks about the tribe of Dan being this forgotten tribe. And then they also talk about they say that they are Jews, but they are liars. So really the whole concept of being a Jew is actually not a bad thing according to the Bible, but it's those who misrepresent what a Jew is, and I don't really care. I mean, I think that I've been dabbling a lot into this whole concept of Christ consciousness, and trying to understand what Christ actually is, or who Christ is. I believe Jesus was a real person, but more and more I'm starting to wonder if he was trying to build a narrative that he was the one that actually was laying the foundation for how other people are supposed to be, as being fulfilling his role, in the sense of not necessarily like the vicar of Christ, like the Pope. I'm talking like anybody that follows that path is doing the will of the Father, and therefore doing the will of Christ. And Christ is really not necessarily a person, but it's an office. And now I don't really subscribe to that thought process per se, but I feel that it can sound a little bit provocative at times, because I feel like it really just depends on your interpretation. You can actually interpret it that way if that is your biased perspective. And you know, I don't mean to seem like I'm on a rabbit trail, but gosh, all this stuff ties together. You know, flat Earth, the spiritual, just our interpretation of reality. And I do believe that there's a right way to look at things. And I know that I'm always thinking, I was talking to my brother-in-law, and he was starting to get heated. And he's like, so wait, are you a relativist? And I'm like, well, I feel like things are relative in a lot of cases. He's like, well, I don't think relativists are Christians. They're not Christians. And I'm like, well, I mean, the whole terminology Christian has certain derogatory connotation in certain certain views. So in some ways, maybe I don't want to have that name attached to me, only because of the derogatory aspects of it. But then again, I believe what Christ was putting out there. So, you know, the thing that really gets me with the whole Christ consciousness is when it talks about, you know, the final temple, or the New Jerusalem. It says, my servants will, or my saints will be given a stone, a white stone with their name written on it, and it talks about Jesus being the cornerstone of this building. And you know, for us to be on par, yeah, Jesus is the cornerstone. He's the first stone that's laid into a building. Now, I don't know if that's the way I'm supposed to interpret it, but it's compelling to me to think that maybe we are of God, and we are vessels that are supposed to do what he wants us to do. And that's exactly what Jesus was, a vessel that did exactly what the Father wanted him to do. So a lot of people would look at this as heresy. And I if my brother Brian is listening to this is exactly what I want to talk to you about, because this is the stuff that has been kind of getting to me lately, because I feel if there's something to it, I want to explore it and try to understand the basis for what it implies. Because a lot of people will try to draw a conclusion before they understand something fully, because it helps represent their bias before. So like, you know, I've heard people say, oh, well, vaccinations are proven to not cause autism. And I'm like, I have seen evidence to prove otherwise. So whose evidence is correct? Oh, sorry, the CDC came out with it, so they're the final authority. So does that just mean I'm a conspiracy nut? Well, I can't argue against that, because I am a conspiracy nut. But at the same time, it's like, why would I settle for the consensus view so that, you know, all the other evidence that may support it's now just about popularity. It's not about reality. You know, that's why a lot of these topics are not very popular, like flat Earth. I mean, flat Earth is freaking more compelling than the globe Earth to me, because when I see through the filter of spirituality and, you know, the world having been deceived since the beginning, if there's a narrative that is put forth where it can create a sense of control over the minds of people, I feel like the devil, quote unquote, is actually, I don't see, in the Bible it talks a lot about these characters that are actually parables, or they're parabolic. They're parabolic in nature. They are so they're basically, they represent an idea. So Jesus might actually fall into that category in some people's views, or the devil might actually fall into that category in other people's views. So like, say the devil represents evil in the world, and evil is defined by the 10 Commandments or the Old Testament or whatever. I mean, so, and then the beasts of Revelation, or Daniel for that matter, talk about these individual beasts that rise up that actually represent a government, or different governments that bind together. So it's like, and then the Antichrist, it says there's many Antichrists. So if all these things represent an individual, it could also represent a community of whatever that is. So Christians are actually Christ, and we're supposed to represent Christ. So I'm not saying that I am Jesus Christ, or I am reincarnated or anything like that. But I wonder if this concept of being Christ is actually being like Jesus. So, but it's kind of like a prerequisite. We have to meet the qualifications. You can't just, this whole works thing, I talk about this all the time, and people say, oh, we're saved by grace. It's not about our works. It's a gift of God. Now, I'm going to venture to say that all right, so this concept of being saved, obviously it throws me for a loop, because with all the stuff that I've heard and the near-death experiences and things like that, I just feel like I'm afraid that there's holes in the scriptures, because God would never be the way that he is. But then again, it's like, or I'm hoping everybody's tracking with where I'm at, because this stuff is so deep, and I just wish that before you freaking give me a thumbs down, this whole concept of the flat earth, let's wrap our heads around this for a minute. Because if you actually talk to a flat earther, or somebody that actually has been investigating it, it's really the key ingredient here is the thought that someone could pull the wool over our eyes enough to deceive us that way. And if you entertain that thought for a brief moment, and you start to realize that there are things out there that validate that perspective, you're like, holy crap, I don't know how in the hell somebody can convince so many people to be collaborating together to deceive the world. But I mean, that seems like the biggest argument that I hear anyway, that flat earth, it just doesn't make sense, because I don't see how anybody can organize such a grand deception. But the same kind of people said the same thing about the moon landing, and man, there's so many holes in the moon landing. And it's weird to me that there's people out there that just cling to these things, like as if they're the final authority. Everything is filtered through that. So I have seen a lot of flaws with the moon landing, like one of the things that really bugs me is that there was a petrified moon rock that was actually petrified wood, is what I mean, and then the telemetry data was lost or taped over, and the technology was more advanced in the 60s and 70s to go to the moon than we are today. Or maybe there's just no interest in going to the moon now because everybody went in the 60s and 70s in the Apollo missions. Well, and then also that freaking Israeli moon mission that just happened. Well, I've been trying to follow that, which is almost impossible to follow because there's like hardly any media coverage on it, which flips me out that they wouldn't have more media coverage on this. But I watched the Jeranism video, or I listened to the Jeranism video. I didn't actually see the footage, but it actually was saying something about the little lunar module crashing or whatever, and so it was a failed mission in the sense of landing, but it was a success as far as getting a vehicle to the moon, as according to the Israeli whatever mission people. So I don't know. The flat Earth I don't think is going to go away in our society. It's not going to go away in my mind. I wish that people wouldn't just reject it like cognitive dissonance. Condemnation before investigation is the height of ignorance. That comes from Einstein. That's like his quote. And but it's true to any situation. If you feel like you have the answers on everything, if somebody comes across with a curveball, you can't just reject it without investigating it. And our society freaking is really bad about doing that. I just feel the one of the biggest hangups for me is the near-death experience picture that is being painted with all the different near-death experiences, talking about God being this like universalist God, and all people are going to heaven, and we may reincarnate. It just depends, and depends on what we want to do, or I don't know. But the whole thing about reincarnation too, I have a theory on. I've heard what's her name? Something Edie's. She had a near-death experience, and she said that people don't reincarnate; they just join this consciousness cloud where we share all the consciousness in one freaking mind. So a lot of people actually get little tidbits of that in this Earth reality now. So like you can actually imagine being like a freaking ant, or you can imagine being another person, and you have a deja vu or something. But really that's just a residual experience that somebody else might have had, and or something else, some other life creature or whatever experience, and you get to experience the residual after effects. Or maybe you have a lucid memory of someone else's memories. I've had dreams like that. It's really interesting. But anyways, if you guys have any thoughts on this, please share them in the comments. And if you want to hear more, like and subscribe and ring the bell icon. And I don't know, that's all I have for now. I have a lot more in my mind, but I don't think I can share it at this point because I'm getting ready to head into my house. So all right, love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.